My chili recipe, a modern version of the one used at the Floral Heights Cafe in Wichita Falls many years ago. 2 to 5 pounds of not very lean meat, maybe ground, coarsely, chopped, cubed, or a combination of textures. Maybe beef, pork, lamb, mutton, or venison. Because chili is all about the spices, not the meat. And a certain amount of grease is necessary for the spices to work properly, so that if using lean game, you would have to add some fat to the meat. A few things required. 1 large onion, 2 smaller onions. Can be white or yellow, but cannot be purple. Mine are yellow. The spices are the most important part. This is from Starting Strength, Basic Barbell Training, 4th edition, not yet released to the public. And it's a recipe by the author of the book about chili. And today, I'm gonna make this chili with a little spin from time to time on things that I think are important. Now, as far as meat goes, today we're using 4 pounds of a variety of meat. I have 2 pounds of beef, 80%, not very lean. I have a pound of spicy hot Italian sausage. You have to get the spicy hot Italian sausage, it's important. And I have 1 pound of mutton because I like the word mutton and I think it sounds good. Now, the first thing we're going to do is cut up some of these onions. I like to start with the largest onion because it's the biggest of the 3. Now, as you cut the onion, getting ready to make the chili, it's important that you do not outsource this, because tears from yourself will be later used inside the chili that add a unique flavor and let those who eat it remember those who prepared it. Now, I'm on the last small onion now, and I'm cutting it. This is a medallion, yellow medallion onion that I import from South Carolina. And these onions, once you get through the exterior layer, provide the most flavor for any onion you'd find in the store. Now, the author says you can use any onion that's not purple, but I'm biased. And I'm going to take some liberties today and use my South Carolina onions. The tears continue to form within my eyeballs, reminding me that I am almost done cutting up my onion. Now the onion is all finished. We need to start browning the meat. Lots of people will do this on a stove or a range, but I prefer to cook on cast iron under an open flame. Now, this is a cast iron pot. Many cast iron products you'll find are made by a company called Lodge. Lodge is a good brand made in America. This is not a Lodge pot. This pot my uncle gave me from South Carolina, and he shipped it to me. And I've made many a thing. You don't wash a cast iron pot, you cook in it. And when you're done, you apply a thin layer of grease. We cook in cast iron because iron is important and because we deal with iron. And I like to cook under an open flame. A stove, especially a gas range, just doesn't provide the heat that you need. An open flame is much better. A little bit here, and just get your flame going. Now, you want to get that turned up nice and high with a lot of heat within your kitchen, and get your cast iron and put it on. this has to get very hot. You don't want to shock the meat. You want to have some grease in the bottom of the pot when you add in the meat. Now, the author likes bacon grease. Personally, I like lard. I find that lard brings a nice texture to the pot prior to the meat. Now, you don't need a ton here. I like that they make this in wax paper. Whenever I open a new cube of lard, it's like Christmas morning undoing a present. And it just, look at that. Can you believe that? Oh. All right, so let's get some lard. The onion knife will work just fine. Cut some off, and into the pan she goes. Now we can hear it sizzle. And we're just going to get this lard nice and hot. Just take the edge off the pan, work it up onto the sides, because anywhere that this meat touches, we want it to have a layer of grease already there. Now that the lard is nice and hot, doesn't matter which meat first, I'm going to start with the beef, and we're just going to throw it down in there and begin to brown it. We have a perfectly hygienic kitchen here. If any meat falls on the floor, just add it back on. Very important to keep a fan on. And I'm going to take down the heat just a little bit now that we have the beef cooking. And now that the beef is in, we're going to add the mutton. Mutton doesn't tear apart quite as nicely, but it adds good flavor and complements the beef. And lastly, the hot Italian sausage. Put into the pot, and your olfactories are starting to wake up as the hot Italian sausage hits the beef mixed with the mutton, all with the lard, and begins to cook. Now, at this point, we're just going to move the beef around, but we don't need to stir this or do much with it. We're going to thoroughly mix the meat, and then we're just going to let it be, put a lid on, and let that liquefy for the next 15 minutes or so. Now, as this meat cooks, we're going to talk about the rest of the things that go into the chili. You'll notice there are no other things out here. There's no beans, there's no tomatoes, there's no paste, there's no bell peppers. No, this is chili. It's meat, and it's onion, and it's spices. Now, for spices, I like chili powder. But you'll notice that my chili powder is not branded by some company that you find in the grocery store underneath the chili powders. No, I like to go to the spice section. I usually go to a Hispanic food store and find the chili pepper powder. This is sweet chili powder. The next thing we have here is ground cumin. Same thing. I buy it in the aisle there where the spices are broken up. It tends to be more fresh, have better flavor than in a jar. And while the author calls for oregano, I like to use Mayor Jam. It's very similar. It's got a nice smell to it, and I prefer it to oregano, as oregano tends to dry out. A jar of garlic is required. It's a lot of work to cut up cloves. I prefer minced in a jar, just as you see here. Salt. And we'll get to this as time goes on. So, we're going to check on our meat here. It's cooking along nicely, turning different colors. The lard has dissipated, and there's a decent amount of grease forming, which is important to absorb the seasonings later as we continue to cook down the meat. Okay, so after about 15 minutes have transpired, we'll check the meat. We have a nice brown broth. The meat has all been cooked, and I have pre-boiled a kettle of water that I'm going to add to the meat. I do not want the water to shock the meat or slow down my cooking process. So I have pre-boiled water that I will add until it covers the meat by about 1 inch in depth. I add the water and put it back, the lid back on. Now, I did not even lose my boil due to the fact that I pre-boiled my water. At this time, I will now add the onions into the pot. With the water raging at a nice boil, I bring over the onions and drop them into the mix along with the beef, the mutton, and the spicy Italian sausage. Now, once the onions are in, before I stir, I grab my jar of minced garlic, and 2 tablespoons should be sufficient that I will add into the mix. Don't measure too appropriately, just get the garlic in there. Now, a quick stir of the pot. Let the ingredients mix all together. And replace the lid of your cast iron pot and put it back on. Now, at this point, we have put in all of the ingredients save the most important. Remember, chili is not about beans. It's not about meat. It's not about corn. Chili is about spices. And next we will put in spices. Now, after about 2 hours have transpired and all of the food has cooked down into a nice broth, we're going to add the spices. Now, if you've never cooked chili like this, you're probably scared for the amount of chili powder that I intend to use. The author calls for 8 ounces per 4 pounds of meat. I call for 2/3 a bag. Just dump it all in. It doesn't need to get real specific and precise. It's just important that you get plenty of chili powder into what you're cooking. Now, that was probably 8 or 10 ounces. Tough to say exactly, and as I work it in, I will now add my cumin. Cumin we want about 4 ounces, seems to be about half. Open it up, and in she goes. Now, the chili is in, the cumin is in. Now, we want to reduce it to a simmer and add in our marjoram. The author recommends oregano. I prefer marjoram. Put it in, couple ounces, and a little stir. Now, before we put the lid on this thing for the final simmer, it's important to talk about the heat of this chili. We used a lot of chili powder, which will give it sufficient heat, but every chili's heat needs to be met with a little back-end sweetness. Now, those from Texas prefer cinnamon, but those with a true taste for nature like maple syrup. Now, I will not buy maple syrup from Canada. I refuse. I will not put Canada maple syrup in my house or cook with it or drink it or use it in anything that I might wish use syrup for. I like syrup from the United States, preferably Vermont. This happens to be Vermont. It's a half gallon that I get from my aunt. She sends it to me every year, and oh man, y'all like syrup? All right, so we add the syrup in to the mix, and this is my twist on this chili. Mix it in, and we're going to leave this now for about 30 minutes to simmer. Now, After about 30 minutes since the syrup addition, we're going to go ahead and turn this puppy off. Completely off. And now we're going to let it sit like this overnight. Don't worry, it's not going to rot. It's not going to spoil. It's not going to go bad as you lay down in your bed and sleep. The chili's going to be just fine. The heat has sterilized it and it'll be fine throughout the night. Tomorrow morning when I wake up, I will come back in here, bring the pot back to a boil. Once I bring it to a boil, I'm going to make a mixture of flour and water that I'll use to get the chili to the consistency I like. Don't worry, flour and water are cheap. It's a quick process. And overnight as you sleep, these spices will marinate with the meat, the beef, the mutton, and the pork Italian sausage, and bring forth the flavors that you so desire. I hope tomorrow, when you eat this chili, you enjoy not only all the meat that you will consume, but the tears from my onion shedding eyes and all of the love that has gone in to this chili. Enjoy.